Hey folks, Mark Scroggins with Scroggins Law Group, and we are back for another episode of the Reclamation Transformation. And today we have a very good friend of mine, Shannon White, who, golly Moses, we have known each other since high school. And I'm not going to give anybody the dates of
5 years
that.
ago.
That's right.
5 years ago.
Recent. Yeah, we were both accelerated through school. So anyway, thank you for joining us
Thank
today.
you for having me. It's great fun.
You bet. Well, Shannon is the executive director of a group called Grace to Change that I am on the board of. That is one of the things I am very proud of. But can you explain a little bit about what Grace to Change is and what y'all do? Because I think the services that are offered to those that can't afford to pay, you know, 25, $50,000 to go to treatment is an underserved area, and so the work y'all do is just phenomenal.
Well, I'll tell you, it's super fun. So, Grace to Change has been around for, I think we're on our 12th year in May. It'll be our 12th year.
That's
And we started
amazing.
off as a very unsuccessful for profit because I wanted to do this and I wanted to work for the underserved population. And my issue was, as soon as people got to my door, I would say, okay, you need treatment, you can't afford it, I'll just give it to you.
Right.
And then about 6 or 8 years ago, the county made a shift to a nonprofit model so they could utilize the funding from LifePath. They switched
And when you
from
say the county, you're talking about Collin
Collin
County.
County. So Collin County chose to go from North Star to LifePath. So LifePath became the local behavioral health authority.
Okay.
And in order to utilize county funds that were funneled through LifePath, we had to become a nonprofit. So we made the decision to do that, which I didn't know anything about. But from the very beginning, my passion was helping the people who are underserved.
Right.
And so now we are one of two nonprofits in Collin County that work with this population. And we are one of two outpatient treatment centers that work with Child Protective Services.
Wow.
So we are outpatient substance abuse treatment. So they come 3 nights a week to us for a group, and then they do individual counseling with us once a week for their program.
Let me ask you, I mean, how did you, I know this story, but how did you get this passion for wanting to start this? Because as you know, it's not something, it's not a business where you're going to go into and say, gosh, I'm going to get rich
Right.
doing this, not in a not-for-profit
Right.
model
Right. Not
and
at
not
all.
serving the people that y'all are
Yeah.
serving that are unserved for a reason.
Yep. So I got sober 15 years ago. So when I got sober, I was compelled. I was an elementary school teacher before I taught for 15 years. So when I got sober, it so drastically changed my life
Right.
that I said, I want to go back in and I want to do this and I want to help other people. So I went back to school and got a counseling degree to become a licensed chemical dependency counselor and started working. Now the irony for me was my addiction didn't take me into the legal system. You know, as they like to say, I was somewhat of a high bottom drunk. My
Right.
trauma wasn't terrible. Not to the people that love me, they would say different probably, but comparatively.
Right.
Um, and so my goal in the beginning was just to help really literally other women who wanted to get sober. That didn't have legal issues.
Right.
And so, ironically, my life took a different path and I began working in the court system, in the legal system, and just fell in love with the intersection between the legal system and recovery. And so most of my people are in jail or come out of jail or child protective services, and I just absolutely love it.
Well, I think that's, I'm glad that you just mentioned are in jail or just coming out of jail. And so the services that Grace to Change provides, I think are so incredibly important because otherwise you've got an opportunity to get someone out of the legal system
Yep.
or you get the opportunity for someone to, give up their amateur status and go pro and
Right.
become locked up off and on for the remainder of their lives.
And I think what I got passionate about was the expense to the county and to taxpayers when we don't help these people and they recidivize.
Right.
So my program is a drop in the bucket compared. It's similar to less than 30 days in a Collin County jail to get treatment that you need, and we all know that you don't get treatment in jail.
Right.
So, not to mention the attorney's fees, court-appointed attorneys. I mean, foster care when we
Right.
put kids in foster care. I mean, it's just an exorbitant cost to the county that people don't want to talk about
Right.
because it's not in my backyard.
Well, so I want to talk a little bit about, where y'all are involved in the legal system because, as you know, with being a board certified family lawyer, I have got drug and alcohol issues. I bet probably in 50 to 70%
Hmm.
of my cases at any one time. And so it plays such a huge piece. And one of the things that I see is you get the person who is an addict or alcoholic and they are so overwrought with guilt
Yes.
and they come in with well, I know that I'm never going to get to see my kids again. And it's like, that's total bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unless you decide that you don't want to see your
Right.
kids, you're going to be able to see your kids. So that's like, an awakening, but you still have to overcome this shame and guilt that
Hmm.
people feel. And, and then you see it from the other side too, which is like he or she did X, Y, and Z, so
Right.
they should never be around. It's like,
Right.
that's not what the law is in the state of Texas. If you can get sober, stay sober, the worst that's going to happen to you is having a step up plan
Right.
and, your whole life can change. And, the life that you have with those children will change dramatically as well. But where
Usually for the better.
exactly. Yeah.
Usually for
So
the better.
so what is your experience when you said that you come in into the court system? What kind of role are you typically playing
So
there?
it depends on the situation, but a lot of times I testify. So I have been around for a long time doing this, and
Right.
I was much more naive in the beginning. I will say that some people say hardened, some people say more knowledge,
Right.
but I am absolutely more than willing to go into a legal proceeding and testify on someone's behalf. I will never be on the cover of Money magazine. It's not something that I charge for because I believe if they've put the hard work in,
Right.
that I'm willing to go and support them.
Right.
So I've testified in divorce hearings, child custody hearings, obviously DWI drug charges. I've kind of run the gamut on those. But I think it's really important to have an advocate that understands addiction. The very premise of addiction is you do things against your moral compass.
Right.
And so the symptoms that are outward to everybody else are repulsive in some cases.
Yeah.
But they're not who the person is, they're what the person has done. And so when someone's willing to do the hard work and make the changes, I want to be an advocate up at the front with them saying they've really done the work.
Right.
And I everyone who knows me knows I am not going to lie for you.
Right.
So,
Well, and that's hugely important
yeah.
because, I remember a little bit ago when I first started practicing law, uh, almighty, actually, just to be blatantly honest, May 7th will be 30 years, and it's hard for me to even
Wow.
believe that. But, one of the things when somebody comes in and there is an issue of alcohol,
Hmm.
okay, or drug addiction,
Right.
whether it is the client is telling me that, hey, I've got this problem and how do we overcome it? Or that the other side is going to be making this allegation. Something that I will typically do is I will want a drug and alcohol evaluation
Right.
done by an expert who can go in and look at the situation. So that's something that you do.
We do. We do a lot of those, and we do them we run the gamut. So attorneys send people to us for an evaluation. CPS sends people to us for an evaluation. Probation sends people to an evaluation. And our evaluation basically says, does a person need treatment? And if so, at what level?
Right.
So do they need inpatient? Do they need detox? Do they need outpatient? Or is their disease in remission they haven't used in 6 months? So based on self-report, they don't have a need for treatment at that time.
Or even you get some, part of, so I use it for two reasons. Okay. One, I want to get someone the help that they need.
Yes, thank you for that.
If they need it.
Yep.
But conversely, my experience in divorce proceedings or any child custody proceedings is, when there is a high level of acrimony, it turns into, people throwing shit
Yep.
at each other.
Right.
And so there are allegations that, let's just say, sometimes the veracity of which could be called into question.
Right.
So there are plenty of times where I am having a drug and alcohol evaluation performed to see, is the person actually an alcoholic
Right.
or a drug addict?
Right.
So, what has your experience been in that regard, and then going in and testifying, and the how receptive the courts are in Collin County to that?
There, Collin County, one of the things that they've done is I feel like they've really educated the judges on substance abuse. I was actually in a courtroom the other day in a custody situation. I didn't have to testify, but and the judge actually called out the attorney because they were making allegations that the person was an addict and could never quit. And the judge actually said, wait, you've said two different things. If they're truly an addict, they can't quit for this short period of time. And I wanted to stand up and cheer. I know she saw me shaking my head in approval.
Right.
So I think they've done a good job of understanding addiction and really paying attention and, providing grace. They genuinely want people to be successful. And so when everybody works together and there's a high level of accountability and a lot of love, which is what we get to give,
Right.
then I think they're receptive to giving people their children back, having people get custody of their children and not being totally removed from their lives.
Right.
But whoever's in the courtroom has to do the hard work,
Right.
which we know is hard.
Well, and I'm glad, and I think the judge you were talking about was Angela Tucker. Is that correct? So shout out to Angela Tucker
right.
for
She was fabulous.
Really doing a great job on that. But one of the things I wanted to expand on a little bit is there are a lot of misunderstandings about drug abuse and alcohol abuse, and where you talk about, if someone doesn't use or drink for a period of time, what that actually means. So being a licensed chemical dependency counselor, and from a personal standpoint,
right.
having experience in this regard, can you expand on that a little bit and explain to folks, what does that mean if somebody doesn't drink or doesn't use for a significant period of time?
Right. So when we do an evaluation, a qualification for treatment is, usually inpatient is you've used within 5 to 10 days.
Right.
Outpatient is usually a 30-day period. We run into sticky situations when someone has a second or a third DWI and they say, well, I haven't had a drink since I was arrested. Well, may or may not be true. And there's oftentimes that we will recommend treatment for someone who says, oh, I haven't had a drink in 3 months. But they've had 3 significant continued use despite negative consequences.
Right.
So it is frustrating because it is all self-report. So we do drug testing and we do a pen and pencil test, but we actually interview them for usually 30 to 45 minutes. One of the things I love about Grace to Change is we've got a heroin addict, we've got a meth addict, we've got someone who does all the drugs, we've got an alcoholic.
Right.
So we usually line you up with whoever has your drug of choice.
Right.
So it's hard to BS them.
Right. I think that's really important too, because there's a difference between someone who is your garden variety alcoholic and someone who was smoking crack or doing meth.
Absolutely.
So, having commonality and walking that same path, I think is incredibly important.
Yeah. And it is frustrating because you hear people go get an evaluation and it's a pen and paper test.
Right.
They used to have, I can't even think what it's called. There used to be a test that you could do and you literally bubbled in the sheets. And it was a Scantron that you put over the top of it and you had no conversation. And people that had maybe once or twice had the same test figured out how to lie on it.
Of course.
And so based on that, they would say, oh, you don't need treatment. And that was always very frustrating to me. There are very specific things that document treatment, but there are a lot of things that are extraneous. If you've got a third DWI and you've never had any type of substance abuse treatment, then chances are I'm going to say, hey, you need to do a little something.
Right.
Even though you've told me you haven't had a drink in 6 months.
Right.
And just shows you're proactive about whatever.
Well, so that gets into, you can have alcoholism rears its ugly head in so many different forms and fashions. You have somebody who is the daily drinker. You can have somebody who's a binge drinker.
Right.
And sometimes, depending on where they are in the process, it can be any one of those at different times.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And, people like to say when the legal system gets involved that I'm good and I'm clean. For most of the people that we work with, the hardcore addicts and alcoholics, they rat themselves out over time.
Right.
So, they can tell a certain story, but then over time when they come back, you can't put it at bay by just choosing not to do it.
Right. So I can, tell you about a recent case that I had where, other side is making allegations of alcoholism
Mm-hmm.
and, he can't control himself and all of this stuff. And so we were in Dallas County, and shout out to Judge Diaz doing a really good job on this. But um, she ordered a sober link on both parties, okay, and for a period of 30 days. And what you see a lot of times is where sober link will be ordered just during periods of possession.
Right.
But if you really
Right.
want to check and see if somebody is alcoholic or not,
Absolutely.
make it all day, every day
Yep.
for a period of 30 days,
Yep.
right? And so through the end of this, nobody has had any drinking. So that kind of nullifies those allegations, or that's my read, and I think that's what a lot of judges see. Is that
Yeah.
an accurate
Yep.
read, do you
Yes,
think?
it absolutely is. And I think the part that's so tricky is when a judge orders there. We went through a phase where the judges were ordering scram devices for everyone.
Right.
Um,
And can you explain what that
so
is?
scram device is an ankle monitor that you put on that detects alcohol at any given time,
Right.
through the sweat in your body.
Right.
It is a great detector for people, but what it doesn't do is prevent you from driving your car, like the deep lung device does in the
Right.
car. And so, you know, us alcoholics were MacGyver.
Right.
So, they had a deep lung device in your car that you have to blow into in order to start your car. Well, alcoholics figured out if I can have my kid in the back seat blow into my deep lung device, then I
Right.
can start my car. Well, now there's a camera.
Exactly.
And so you can't have the camera. So then they also figure out, well, I'll get a beater car.
Right.
So I'm going to get another car to drive without the deep lung device in it, and I'm going to drive that on the weekends.
Right.
And so we tell everybody that gets that, start your car every day. Make
Right.
sure you start your car every day, because there needs to be documentation that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Right.
I feel like people can sometimes stop for 30 days. I do feel like they can do that.
Right.
So people need a longer period of time of the checking. But it's, SoberLink works.
Yeah.
It does work.
So, it's interesting. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about is, so often we see people that are, dual addicted.
Mm-hmm.
And so the biggest one that I tend to see is depression.
Mm-hmm.
Depression seems to be a big piece
Right.
of this. And so people self-medicate a lot
Right.
of the time to try to, you get the dopamine or the serotonin releases,
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden I feel better.
Yeah.
But then, when you don't, you're,
Right. We go back to what works, which is our alcohol.
exactly.
Yep.
So, do y'all refer people out to a psychiatrist for those people that you think need medication management?
Absolutely. One of the beautiful things that happens in Collin County is LifePath provides mental health and substance abuse treatment free if you qualify. So they actually have psychiatrists on staff at LifePath that we can use for co-occurring disorder clients.
Right.
They can get put on medication, and again, it's at no charge to them if they qualify.
Right.
And so that's wonderfully helpful. We do have some psychiatrists that we send people to, addiction specialists that we love, because I do think that's a big issue.
Absolutely. So, and I also wanted to clarify, your treatment is not just for adults, but there's
Right.
a large number of adolescents
Right.
that
We
y'all are
have a
treating.
separate adolescent program now, and we are the only one in Collin County that works with adolescents that utilizes the Collin County funding. And we are in person, and we have a wonderful therapist, Bonnie Donaldson, who does an incredible job with our adolescents. I can tell you, they all come in, and there was a time that she texts about 7:20 groups over at usually 6:57. And she said, it's going to be a little bit. They want to stay and play a card game with me again. And these are high school kids that want to stay with their therapist and play another card game before
Wow.
they go home.
Yeah.
So she does just an incredible job. And again, that funding for adolescents can be free through the county. We can utilize that. We also take Medicaid for our adolescents. So
Okay.
anybody that has Medicaid can qualify.
I think that is so important, because something that is very sad to me is in child custody matters,
Yes.
whether it's coming out of a divorce or just what we refer to as a SAPSR, so a suit affecting parent-child relationship.
Right.
So just think child custody,
Right.
instead
Right.
of thinking about that. But, people get confused over terminology that
Right.
is used
Right.
in child custody cases.
Yes.
So when we talk, the presumption in Texas is that parents should be named joint managing conservators.
Okay.
And they think that that means, a lot of people think that that means, 50-50 50-50 possession and access, and that doesn't have anything to do with it, actually.
Right.
Conservatorship is all talking about the rights and duties that you have to make parenting decisions.
Right.
Right. So the big ones out there are the right to make decisions on non-emergent medical or invasive medical procedures, but also to make psychiatric and psychological decisions for the children, and the right to make educational decisions. And so what I see an awful lot of the time is you get this vortex, for lack of a better way of putting it, where all of those kind of come together. And so where I see, let's say that you've got a child that has a drug or alcohol problem, or let's say that you've got a kiddo that's got ADD, ADHD problems. And so you're getting something from the school that is saying, hey, little Johnny, needs to be put on some medications because
Right.
he's running laps around, around the classroom, and I can't teach him or anybody else while that is happening.
Right.
And unfortunately, you see parents that want to argue because one says, hey, we ought to get them on medication. And the other says, oh, well, if he or she wants that, I can't agree to that,
Right.
because they're the devil
And the
incarnate.
child suffers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not to mention, I mean, the child suffers in so many different areas. And that's really a hotbed, I think, for dispute on, do you treat someone for ADD and
Right.
ADHD? Because, we have a history of, boy, the pharmaceutical companies make a freaking mint off of everything. And it's super easy to just throw shit at someone
Yep.
when maybe they don't need it. Maybe
Right.
they need a
Right.
little extra attention. But there are plenty of times when someone really, really needs it.
Right.
So, but I also see that with, different medication that might be important for adolescents, and that's a hard one in and of itself.
Sticky
Because
wicket for
yeah,
sure.
if you've got some a kid that needs depression meds, the effect of those medications on an adult and an adolescent are
Right.
vastly different.
Right. And I think that's the issue. So back to what you were saying,
Yeah.
joint, or what's the one you want if you're a parent? You want a joint conservatorship or managing, or what is it?
So there are different ones. Okay, so the presumption in Texas is that parents should be joint managing conservators of their kids. The other options are that someone can be named sole managing conservator, someone could be named possessory conservator, or someone could not be named a conservator at all. So if you're not named a conservator at all, that's pretty rough. There are a lot of bad facts out there.
Right.
And either the judge or the jury made a really difficult decision in doing that, or they made the wrong decision, and that's something that can be righted on appeal. Okay?
Okay.
So when somebody is named sole managing conservator, those rights and duties that I was talking about, invasive medical procedures, psychological decisions, psychiatric decisions, educational decisions, there are others, but they don't come into play as much, so I don't want to really waste any time talking about
Right.
it. But it means that that person has the exclusive right to make those decisions. I should mention the biggest of all of those is the exclusive right to determine the primary domicile of the child or children. So that just means if the kids live 51% of the time or greater with you. So when you hear someone say, I'm primary, that's all that means.
Okay.
Okay. It doesn't mean that they're the best parent or anything like that. It just means that the children live primarily with them. So when someone's sole and they've got all those exclusive, it's the same thing with the domicile issue, but additionally, there isn't going to be a geographic restriction.
Okay.
So if you think somebody is named sole and they want to move up to Seattle, bye bye, they can do that. And so that's a large impact, because you see that with people that, let's just talk about traditional gender roles. So let's say wife is from Boston and follows husband to Dallas, and they get a divorce, and she doesn't have any of her support system
Right.
here, and
Right.
dad's got really, really bad facts that would allow mom to get sole managing. So that's not something that happens very often. It happens, but you've got to have bad facts. The biggest one is where you have somebody that has been either a conviction for family violence or the district court finds that there has been family violence within 2 years. And so by statute, the court cannot name the parties joint managing conservators.
Oh, I didn't realize if you have an
Yeah.
assault family violence, you cannot be.
Within 2 years.
Ooh,
Within 2 years.
fun fact for me to
Right.
learn.
So, yeah. So, not just a conviction, but let's say what happens in a lot of these cases now is the victim, let's say, has been stuck in an abusive relationship. And so they do what they do most frequently, and they don't want to press charges. That's where
Right.
you hear the district attorney is saying, well, okay, that's great, but we're still going to
Picking it
prosecute,
up. Yep.
right? So if that court prosecutes it and they find the defendant guilty of family violence and it is alleged and brought forth during a divorce proceeding or a child custody proceeding, and that has happened within 2 years, the court has to name someone's sole. Okay, has to.
Wow, that is fascinating.
Yeah, so that's a big deal that is out there, and that's one of the reasons that that is such a big fight. Not to mention, it also does some other things in the context of a divorce. So I don't know if you know this or not, but
Probably not.
Texas doesn't have alimony. Okay, Texas you can have contractual alimony. Okay, but Texas doesn't. A court can't award alimony. Okay,
Right.
a court can award what is called spousal maintenance. Okay, which is very similar. But a court can increase it or decrease it based on a series of facts, and I don't want to bore everybody to tears with all of that, but the impact of a family violence conviction or a finding of family violence is that a court can award spousal maintenance where they wouldn't be entitled to it otherwise. So there are a whole
Wow.
family violence is the big caveat on everything, and it's why it is. I think there are some attorneys that try to get a finding of family violence where it's absolutely unwarranted because of the advantages that it plays in divorce. It obviously plays into the division of community property, but also the impact that it has on child custody. I mean, because that's a checkmate right there.
Well, and think about it. So most alcoholics have gotten in a good bar fight. So
Right.
that aggressiveness comes out in with substance use, and so we see a lot of that.
So let's talk about like what you just mentioned. So let's say that somebody's had a number of bar fights, okay? And then there's an allegation that is made by, the wife against the husband that there has been family violence in the marriage, but the police have never been called and there have never been any witnesses to this outside, but you've got a he said, she said, and you've got these other convictions that can be mentioned. What do you think the outcome is on that a lot of the time? And now we've got, in Texas, judges are elected, which is not the way it is in a lot of other states where they are appointed.
Right.
And so, so you have politics that are brought in, and most judges aren't looking to just serve a single term. They're looking to see, to serve multiple terms. So no judge wants to have their picture up on the nightly news about, hey, they didn't put this in place and this guy went out and killed his wife.
Yep.
Where you hear about that.
Absolutely.
Watch the news and you're going to hear about
Absolutely.
that multiple times during during the year. We had one not too long ago. I think it came out of Southlake where they got done with a mediation. I don't think they got things resolved. Dad pulls up next to wife at a stoplight and shoots and kills her.
Jeez.
I know, it's crazy. I mean, what people do is insane.
Yeah.
So,
And I think it's, one of the things that you and I've talked about before is people need to have representation
Right.
because just in this short period of time, I mean, I'm not married and I haven't gone through a divorce, but you learn things that, I mean, all of those things are super important to the people that I
Right.
work with. Um, this is why you say stay away, don't engage, don't do any of those things,
Right.
because the supposition of truth is basically a lot of times all that they need.
That's right.
And I like what you've said, bad facts.
Right.
I'm going to use that term because bad facts are things that we can't dispute.
That's right. Well, I don't want to say that you can't dispute bad facts, but there are things that are out there. And the other thing is, like what we were talking about a little bit ago, just because you have bad facts doesn't mean it's a checkmate. Let's say
Right.
that there has
Right.
been a finding of family violence, okay, and the family violence is just against I say just, but it doesn't include the children.
Children. Okay.
Does that mean that you're not going to have a relationship with your children, that you're
Right.
not going to have possession and access of your children? No, it absolutely does not mean that.
Right.
Now, does it mean you're going to have to go through a BIP program, which is, for those that don't know, battery intervention and prevention program, right? So, yeah, they're probably going to have to do that. And they're going to be hoops that person has
Right.
to jump through.
Right.
But just because someone's soul managing and someone's possessory, it doesn't mean that they're not going to have a standard possession order, which is what is the presumption that is in the best interest of the kids.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
so for those out there that don't know what that is, that's basically the first, third, and fifth weekend. So to make it easier to digest, when you think about someone having basically every other weekend, typically that's going to be kind of a standard possession order. It's different than every other weekend, but that's easier for me to get it across.
Right.
And so where you've got alternating holidays and a big chunk during the summer
Right.
and stuff like that. So even if you're possessory conservator, you're still going to have that most likely. You might have to go through some step ups.
Mm-hmm.
There might have been some counseling that was ordered. There might have been a child custody evaluation that was performed that recommended certain things. But as long as you follow what those recommendations are, it's
Right.
kind of like, jumping out of a plane. I recommend
That
you
you have
wear
a
a
parachute,
parachute,
yeah.
right? You don't have to,
Right.
but, I strongly recommend it.
Right.
It's the same thing here.
Yeah.
Okay.
And one of the things that we do at Grace to Change is because I fully to my core understand the ups and downs of recovery.
Right.
So we give free aftercare for life.
That's so big.
It's huge.
So big.
And they can come back and come to a group. We do reduced rates on individual counseling, but we do it for a reason. So if somebody comes to me in the beginning of their family custody situation or criminal case, they can do our program, which is 12 weeks, but then they can come back and stay in contact with us once a week for as long as they want to. Or they can come 3 times a week. We had a man that came 3 times a week for 8 years.
Oh my gosh.
Because he had a choice to go to AA or to go to treatment,
Right.
and his probation officer allowed him to come to us. So instead of doing AA, he came to us. And
that speaks really loudly about the connection that your clients, patients, feel with Grace to Change, which, I can tell you based on my experience and a lot of my clients' experience, that's not typical.
No. And I think I'll say it because it happened today. We lost a client this morning. So I found out on the way over here that we lost a client. And it's a client that we've been in contact with for 8 years. And, we haven't said anything, but fentanyl is deadly right now.
Let's talk about that.
Let's do.
More.
Because it is, and in this specific instance, we, obviously they just pronounced him dead at 1:30 last night. So we're not 100% sure. But it does appear that it was a one-hit wonder relapse. Okay. And so what we found at Grace to Change, we're drug testing for fentanyl now.
Right.
What we found is it's literally in everything. So we've tested people that said, "Oh, I've only smoked weed." They've tested positive for fentanyl.
Let me back up for just a second. When you said it's literally in everything, and you're not talking about prescription meds that somebody actually gets from a pharmacy.
Correct.
But everything else.
Any pill that you buy on the street, there or any illicit substance basically now.
Right.
So marijuana, alcohol, Xanax, Percocet. Percocets, they don't even make Perc 30s anymore.
Right.
So if you're taking a Perc 30, you are absolutely taking fentanyl.
Oh my God.
So, and it's different. So in this case with this client last night, I am making an educated summation.
Right.
But my hunch is he went back and did his drug of choice And it had either been too long since he had done it and his body wasn't ready for the amount that he did, or it was laced with fentanyl. And my hunch is we're going to find out it was laced with fentanyl.
Yeah, it's amazing because that is such a, there was the thing, was it at R.L. Turner with the house that was just across the street?
Yep.
They had fentanyl in everything. And, so all you have to do is pick up the paper and read stuff. And they're talking about the national epidemic of fentanyl because it's so damn cheap. And then these people that, someone thinks they're buying pills off the street. And so they're thinking they're getting pharmaceutical grade. But all these people have to do is go out and they buy a pill press and they go out and buy a specific dye that is generally the color of whatever that pill is, and it can be 100% fentanyl. And I mean, these are people that have absolutely no grounding in morality because it's, fentanyl's cheap as hell.
Right.
And we can make it look like this and we can sell it for, this is what the return on our investment is.
And the legal system is now trying to make it a homicide if you are dealing with, and you're dealing fentanyl, even if you don't know, and someone dies of it. So, and I think the issue that people have is this isn't adults making adult decisions. We buried a 16-year-old like 4 months ago who had a fentanyl overdose, and that was the only drug in his system. And so, you think you're taking all these other things and you die. We have a client that's on his name's Mike Land, and he lost his son to a fentanyl overdose, and he is on bike tours doing national parks to represent it. And his son took 2 perk 30s. And the only thing in his system was fentanyl. And he died sitting up in his chair. And Mike is out trying to raise awareness. So, gone are the days where everything is safe. I mean, this is literally killing people all the time.
That's so incredibly sad. And, for those kids that it's like, hey, this is cheap and I'm looking for, an easy, fun high kind of deal. It goes from euphoria to it's over.
Yep. And we're hearing now in your aspect of it in family law cases.
Right.
So there's babies that are dying now of fentanyl overdoses, and it's because it's transdermal. So you touch it and it gets into a baby's skin. And so parents are in custody battles right now where both of them are high on fentanyl and the baby tests positive and dies.
I have not experienced that yet. So that is, I say yes.
Sadly, because, I think you will. I mean, I really do, because it is, we've experienced it in our office, people who have said, my husband was dealing, I haven't done it, and the baby tests positive. So you pray the baby tests positive in their hair when they're alive.
Right. That's so scary.
It is so scary.
I want to back up and talk about one thing that you mentioned a little bit ago with the drug testing, because typically, whether it's been ordered by the court or not, I am going to, if I'm going to have someone undergo a drug and alcohol evaluation, I'm going to want that person tested.
Right.
And most evaluators are going to order it anyway. But you mentioned that y'all have got some new testing abilities.
We do.
That are incredibly important. So can you elaborate on that a little bit?
You bet. So people do what's called a point of contact test, where you go and you pee in a cup,
right,
and then you use a dip test, and it tells an initial positive or negative.
Right.
What that doesn't do is it doesn't test for levels of the substance in their system. So when you
the particular substance.
Correct.
Okay.
So it just says positive or negative.
Right.
So we do a 12 panel. We do alcohol. With alcohol, we test for ETG.
Can you say, when you start talking about a 12 panel, can you explain what that is?
So 12 panel means it tests for 12 different drugs.
Okay.
And so from THC to opiates to methadone to Suboxone, buprenorphine. So it tests for cocaine. It tests for the 12 prominent things.
Okay.
Not alcohol.
Okay.
Then we do a separate alcohol test. And in our alcohol test, it's what tests for ETG, which is ethyl glutamate smart something. But it's the enzyme that your liver excretes.
Okay.
So, and that goes actually about 3 days.
Okay.
So we can do all of that in a point of contact test.
Okay.
What probation does is they have an observed test. So someone observes them taking the test, so they can't bring fake urine or whatever.
Right.
And then they send it off to a lab.
Right.
And so there is an initial screening that's done by the lab that
Right.
tells positive or negative. And they have certain cutoffs for different substances that say if you've got 500 milligrams of cocaine in your system, anything above 500 and you're going to be positive.
Okay.
So we've hooked up with Millennium drug testing.
Okay.
And they CDC is their CDC number one people. And part of the reason I wanted to do this is it is a more expensive test, but we test them in house. We can do a dip test on them. So we're going to have an initial screening of whether they're positive or negative for immediate purposes. If
Right.
someone tests positive for fentanyl, chances are I'm going to refer them to a hospital.
Absolutely.
So we can do that still. Then we send it to the lab, and it's actually got deeper cutoffs. So it'll test more than probation's test will.
So when you say deeper, you're talking actually a lower
Right.
number.
So if
So,
cocaine was 500 on a probation test, then ours is like 100. So in many cases, it's going to catch even the smallest amount of a substance in someone's system. It can actually differentiate when it does the testing between Delta 8, Delta 9, Delta 10, and marijuana.
so that's something that I wanted to delve into a little bit more because there are a lot of these tests that, well, it's my understanding that Delta 8, 9, and 10, at least currently,
Right.
are legal and probably
9 is not.
9 is not?
8 and 10 are, 9 is not.
Okay. So that makes it
Uh,
all very
right,
interesting because
right.
it's an over-the-counter substance that you can get
Yeah.
and it's not illegal, but it's showing up as a positive
Right.
on marijuana
Right.
a lot of the time. So so you will have the ability to differentiate between
Yep.
those?
This test will absolutely do that. And I think it's really important, especially with our adolescents,
Right.
Delta 8, it's legal miss. We should be able to do it, blah, blah, blah. You're still not old enough. It's a mute point, but it absolutely tests positive. So we've got adults that are heroin or whatever, and they've stopped for probation, but they
Right.
go and buy Delta 8 because they can get it at the over-the-counter stores, and they test positive for marijuana, and it's a violation of their probation.
Right.
And so
What is your opinion, for what it's worth, on Delta 8, or I hadn't heard of Delta 10, frankly,
Yep.
or Delta 9 for that for that
Yeah.
matter. But you see Delta 8 at I don't want to say 7-Eleven because I don't think that's right, but
Right.
all the various mom and pop stores that they've
Yeah.
got it selling over the counter. And so, what's your thought on?
I mean, I think if you use it appropriately, I mean, I do think we have a dear friend who owns a store and they actually sell that there.
Right.
And I think, they've taken all the precautions. They put it in the back. They listened to when we talked about it.
Right.
We don't want it in the front because you're going to put Delta 8 up and all of our kids are going to try to race in and do it.
Right.
So they've taken the precautions with it. I think, it's kind of the same philosophy with near beer.
Yeah.
You want to take beer and you're doing the same thing. You're cracking one open at the end of the day. It's going to remove stress. And pretty soon you're going to edge back into doing the real stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like, especially with our younger kids, if they
Yep.
get a Delta 8 pen, we're just going to suck it inside out and see if we can get as high as we would on regular marijuana. So,
Right.
I think it has to have a lot of education behind it,
Gotcha. Right.
So.
So, how often, with what you do, are you actually having to go back into courts?
More now. We didn't a lot during COVID. I spent a
Right.
lot of time working on the drug courts in Collin County, and when
Right.
I did that was a weekly, exposure to judges and the team making decisions for people.
Right.
We do more of that now, and quite honestly, we have gotten a lot of our clients are CPS,
Right.
and so we work with CPS for. To get kids situated, to get kids back in their custody, to do that before they actually go to court.
Right.
And so that's been a huge blessing. We very seldom have gone for termination hearings. I think we've maybe lost 2 kids that didn't go back to their parents, which is something we're really proud of.
Yeah,
But
that's huge.
it is huge. And part of that is awareness, and part of it is CPS being willing to reach out to us and let us help them and really listening to what we say.
Right.
Today at our office, we're seeing a family who doesn't have a CPS case, but I'm seeing the dad. My other therapist is seeing the mom who is the alcoholic, and our adolescent specialist is seeing the child, all in the same family.
Oh my goodness.
And so we talk about we work with the entire family.
Right.
And so, fortunately, we're not spending as much time in court, but we are helping attorneys get their ducks in a row so they have the ability to make a good plea agreement for our clients.
Well, that's big as well. So one of the things that I want to talk a little bit more about, what can we do, as far as awareness out there to help people become aware of not just all the problems that
Right.
there are
Right.
with alcoholism and drug addiction, but what resources there
Right.
are like Grace to Change
Yep.
and what that can do for your life.
Yep, I'm grateful that you said that, because one of the things, especially with this fentanyl, so there's a bunch of videos that are going around now called Fentanyl Factor. It's a good video,
Okay.
but it shows very sad families who've lost their children, and we suck people into the fear and the anxiety. And I want to be a person that delivers hope about these things.
Right.
You know, there's a strong dose of reality that has to come with it. This is a real problem,
Right.
but there is also love and solutions. We're actually doing something with the Potter's House, where the churches are going to get involved.
When you say the Potter's House, can you, for those
Potter's
that don't
House-
know what that is?
Potter's House Church. So
Okay.
they have reached out to us, and we were going to do a presentation in front of their group on a Saturday morning. And what they've asked is that we do a presentation. They're going to film it to show it in all of their services. So
Wow.
we are super proud of them for, not often do you get to mention God and drugs in the same sentence. Probably should do more of it, but
Right.
so there are a lot of resources in Collin County, and there are a lot of resources that help with substance abuse, that help with housing, that help with all the issues that come out of what happens when you're trying to get your life together after you've admitted you have a problem.
Right.
And so we want to be a voice of help in that. We want you to be able to pick up the phone and call us. If we're not a fit for you, which we're not for everyone, if you've got
Right.
managed care insurance, I would rather you use your insurance. But we have a connection to a lot of other places around where we can point you to get the help that you need.
So y'all can be, y'all can kind of, for lack of a better way of putting it, quarterback the situation.
Absolutely be consultants.
Okay.
Yep. And we want to do that. Because we know making that phone call is really hard.
Right.
Our phone rings and people often say, I have zero idea where to start, so I'm just going to start talking. Great. That's what you do.
That's so huge because you actually see now, or I have seen, you've got private consultants that do exactly what
Right.
we're
Right.
talking about, and whether it's starting with an intervention because the person is not there, and I have my own opinions about interventions,
Right.
that can be great. Most of the time, not.
The show is just great.
Yeah, it's a great show. I
If you
really
wanna
like
watch
the
it for
show.
entertainment
yeah,
value.
But then there are lots of people that are looking at that, and then they're helping them get to what makes sense for that person, and it might be in state, it might be local, it
Right.
might be out in California or Arizona. There are very well known programs in both places,
Right.
that are very, very expensive and
Well, and a lot of people think, oh, I'm just going to send them to AA.
right.
Or I'm going to send them to NA. And
Right.
and they are a fabulous support. But I think times have changed. Back in the 60s when people were smoking weed, it was so minimal in the content of THC.
Right.
Now the drugs that people are using literally are deadly. And so alcohol can kill you, Xanax can kill you, and detoxing from those substances. There are plenty of people who come to me and they are drinking so much alcohol that I literally have to say, you cannot stop cold turkey because it will kill you.
Right.
So you either need to titrate down or you need to go to a hospital and let them manage it.
Exactly.
And people don't know that. So
Right.
people just say, you got to stop drinking right now. Well, you could
Die.
kill someone you love by demanding that request.
Right.
And, that's in extreme cases. But, you need an expert to help point you in a direction of exactly what they need.
Right. Well, I love hearing what y'all are doing with the Potter's House.
Yeah.
And so one of the things, how do people get a hold of you and get a hold of the folks at Grace to Change to begin that journey?
So pick up the phone and call us. We are very proud that we just got a high-tech phone system. We've just upgraded our phone system. So now you can actually call and you can talk to Jennifer or Kim or Bonnie or Daniel or Shannon and leave a very specific message, and we get it on our phone.
Okay.
So we are not 40-hour-a-week workers. So
Gotcha.
this is a set for 24/7 addiction. So you can call, reach out, leave a specific message. We can get back to you. You can check out our website, gracetochange.org.
Okay.
I encourage people to follow us on Facebook. We're going to try to put more awareness out about fentanyl and get some facts out.
So is this also something, let's say the folks at Prestonwood Baptist Church who have 40,000 plus
Yes.
members could say, call you reach out to you on the website and say, Shannon, we need help on educating our
Yes,
folks and our.
please do. That's our hope. Our hope is that we can put something together with police, with fire, with all these people, so we can actually navigate this crisis together. And I do believe churches get a ton of phone calls about people that are suffering with addiction.
Absolutely.
And as much as I love churches, they're not equipped to handle, we can pray for people and that's always a great thing, but a lot of times people need more than that.
Yeah.
And so we want to encourage them to utilize the resources that are out there and to ask for the help that they need. We would love to go to any church that wants to do it and give a presentation of facts.
Right. Well, and one other thing I want to make people aware of. So Grace to Change, gets public funding, and the rest are benefactors.
Right.
Right. There's not enough of the self-pay to keep y'all doing what you are doing.
Right.
So, getting donations is something that is hugely important for y'all to be able to continue to do this work.
It absolutely is. And it's very hard. It's hard to ask for help. It's hard to do it. And let's be honest, drug addicts and alcoholics aren't the sexiest people.
Right.
Small children that need daycare or special needs kids, people can get funding for that. We have a really hard time. And so I want to encourage people to do their research, to figure out what's out there, to figure out where to donate money to places like Grace to Change that actually have impact. We are boots on the ground.
Right.
We have anywhere from 25 to 30 adults at any given time. And right now our adolescent group is getting close to full at 10.
Wow.
So, and we figure probably 85 to 95% of our people don't pay for anything that comes to us.
Right.
So their treatment is free.
Well, and one thing y'all have got coming up now is there's going to be a gala in the fall where people can learn more and can make donations and can actually do something to help their community.
Yep.
Yes.
Be sponsors, come and see. So I encourage people to follow us on Facebook. We try to stay ahead of what's going on. We're encouraging people now, if you've lost a loved one, that our treatment program costs $3,500 for 12 weeks of treatment and lifetime aftercare. So if you want to start a scholarship fund in honor of someone that you love, we will treat someone for that small fee and give you the recognition. So, their life doesn't have to be in vain.
And I hate to mention this, but this is something that's always good when you start making these kind of donations. You've got tax write-offs associated with that, right? So
absolutely,
you can help yourself in that regard while doing really good for the community.
Yeah, and I wish I could figure out more. I don't understand all that, but I do know it is, you do get a benefit on your taxes for doing it. And it does go. And we're doing a strategic plan that's going to come out pretty soon. And when I've done it, it's been shocking, quite honestly, shocking to me. Our expenses and our probably 90% of the money that goes into expenses at Grace to Change are for salaries and rent.
Right.
We probably spend between 8 and 10%, if even that, on phone, food for the people. That's the other thing. People can make donations of food, water. We had a client drive back up and say, open the back door, here's my truck. And he probably brought us $500 worth of water and snacks and everything from Sam's.
That's so good.
So we try to feed the clients every night, adolescents and adults, because most of them, if we can feed them a meal, they can put the $10 towards a meal, towards gas for their car.
Right.
So we try to do that, have snacks, have candy, have water. So that's another way people can give back.
Well, thank you for being here.
Thank you for letting me do this. This was fun.
Good. I'm glad. I really enjoyed it. And I thought it was so important for people to understand what an organization like Grace to Change does for the community, and how, getting educated is so important, because this is something, this is the kid that lives next door to you.
Touches
that
everybody.
is, an Eagle Scout and straight A student and all of this that, runs into trouble.
What you think.
That's exactly right. Well, thank y'all for joining us for another version of the Reclamation Transformation, and make sure you reach out and find Shannon and her great group at Grace to Change. Look them up on Facebook or any one of a number of other places on social media. And don't forget, folks, change starts with you, so make your mark.